She lay under a broken car in the pouring rain. Scarred hands, soaked clothes, her boy waiting in the back seat. He drove past in a $250,000 Bentley. But when he pulled over and saw her hands, he did not see poverty. He saw something that made his blood run cold. What did a billionaire see in a single mother's scarred hands that shook him to his core? Stay with me. This story will change you. This is how a woman named Nadine showed a billionaire that the most dangerous thing in this world is not failure, it is looking away. It was a rainy Friday evening in Atlanta. The kind of rain that does not just fall, it attacks. Heavy sheets of water slamming against the pavement so hard you could hear it over everything. The sky had gone dark early, thick gray clouds swallowing the last bit of daylight like it was never coming back. On Interstate 20, heading south toward Hapeville, a black Bentley Continental GT moved through the rain like a shadow, smooth, quiet. The kind of car that makes the world outside feel like someone else's problem. Inside, the leather seats were warm. The air smelled like sandalwood and fresh coffee. The dashboard glowed soft blue, and through the speakers, John Coltrane played low and steady. Behind the wheel sat a man named Terrence Brooks. He was 41 years old, tall, clean-shaven, built like someone who still made time for the gym, even when his schedule said he should not. He wore a charcoal gray suit, no tie, the top button undone. His watch alone cost more than most people's cars. Not that he thought about it. He never thought about it. That was the thing about Terrence. Money had become like oxygen, always there, never noticed. Terrence was the founder and CEO of Brooks Automotive Group. If you have ever bought a replacement part for your car anywhere in the southeast United States, there is a good chance it passed through one of his warehouses. The auto parts industry in America moves over $400 billion a year. Most people never think about it. They just want their car fixed. But somebody has to make sure the right part gets to the right shop at the right time. That was what Terrence built, a machine that kept other machines running. 14 distribution centers across 8 states. Over 3,000 employees. Forbes had written about him twice. But tonight, Terrence was not thinking about Forbes or warehouses or distribution logistics. He was coming back from a board meeting that had gone 2 hours longer than it needed to. His chief financial officer had presented the quarterly numbers. They were good. They were always good. But the board wanted more. They always wanted more. Terrence had smiled through the whole thing, nodded in the right places, said the right words. Now alone in his car, the smile was gone. He picked up his coffee and took a sip. It had gone cold. He set it back down and stared at the road ahead. The wipers swept back and forth, back and forth. The rhythm was almost hypnotic. Terrence had been divorced for 3 years. His ex-wife Vanessa had once told him something he never forgot. She said, "You are the loneliest man I have ever met, and you do not even know it." He had laughed it off at the time. He was not laughing now. His phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A text from his assistant. Tomorrow's schedule updated. First meeting at 7:30. Terrence glanced at it and looked away. 7:30 on a Saturday. Of course. He turned off the interstate and onto a smaller road that cut through South Atlanta. It was not his usual route. Construction on his normal exit had forced him this way. The road was narrow, 2 lanes, cracked asphalt, no streetlights for long stretches. The kind of road rich people never drive on. The kind of road where the potholes had potholes. Rain hammered the windshield so hard the wipers could barely keep up. Terrence leaned forward slightly, squinting through the blur, and then he saw it. On the right side of the road, pulled halfway onto the shoulder, sat a car, an old Honda Civic, faded blue paint. One taillight working. The hood was up, propped open with what looked like a broomstick, and underneath the car, lying flat on the wet ground in the pouring rain, was a person. A woman. Terrence slowed down. His headlights washed over the scene, and he saw something else. Inside the Civic in the back seat, a small face pressed against the foggy window. A child. A little boy staring out at the rain with wide, patient eyes. Terrence almost drove past. He wishes he could say he stopped because he was a good man. But the truth was simpler and stranger than that. He stopped because of her hands. He pulled the Bentley over about 30 feet ahead of the Civic. He sat there for a moment, engine running, wipers still going. He did not know why he stopped. He did not know what he was going to say. But something would not let him drive away. Terrence stepped out of the car. The rain hit him immediately, cold and heavy, soaking through his suit jacket in seconds. He did not grab an umbrella. He did not even think about it. He just walked toward the Honda, with his shoes splashing through puddles on the broken road. As he got closer, the scene became clearer. The woman was lying on her back on a piece of flattened cardboard she had placed on the wet ground beneath the car. Her legs stuck out from under the front bumper. She wore dark work pants and a gray t-shirt, both completely soaked through. Her sneakers were old, the soles worn thin. He could hear her working. Metal on metal. The sharp clink of a wrench turning a bolt. Then a pause. Then another turn. There was a rhythm to it. Steady, controlled. Not the fumbling sounds of someone guessing. This was something else entirely. Terrence knelt down slightly and looked under the car. What he saw made him stop breathing for a second. Her hands. Even in the dim light from a small flashlight she had propped against the engine block, he could see them clearly. The skin from her knuckles all the way up to her wrists was covered in scar tissue. Burn scars. The kind that twist and pull the skin tight, leaving it shiny and uneven. Some parts were darker. Some parts were raised like ridges on a map. But those scarred hands were moving with a precision that Terrence recognized. He had spent 20 years in the automotive industry. He had watched hundreds of mechanics work. He knew the difference between someone who learned from a YouTube video and someone who learned by doing it 10,000 times. This woman was not guessing. She was not struggling. She was diagnosing. Her fingers traced the belt path around the alternator pulley with the kind of confidence that comes from years of professional training. She found the problem, touched it once, confirmed it, and reached for a replacement part she had already laid out beside her on the cardboard. Every movement was deliberate. Every tool was in the right place. This was not a woman trying to fix her car. This was a technician performing a repair, and a skilled one at that. The little boy in the back seat had not moved. He sat quietly hugging a small blue backpack against his chest. He was maybe 6 or 7. His eyes were big and calm, not scared, just waiting, like he had seen this before, like this was normal. Terrence stood back up, rain running down his face. His suit completely ruined. He did not care. He was staring at those hands, burned, scarred, damaged, and yet more skilled than any pair of hands in his entire company. He stepped closer to the car and cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he said, not loud, just enough to be heard over the rain. The wrench stopped. The woman went still under the car. Then slowly she slid out from beneath the Civic. She sat up on the wet cardboard and looked at him. Rain dripped from her hair, which was pulled back in a tight bun. Her face was thin but strong. High cheekbones. Dark eyes that locked onto his without blinking. She did not look afraid. She looked like someone who had been interrupted and did not appreciate it. Her jaw was tight. Her grip on the wrench did not loosen. She looked at his suit. She looked at his shoes. She looked at the Bentley parked up ahead with its hazard lights blinking in the rain. Then she looked back at him. She did not say a word. She just waited. Guarded. Ready. "I saw your hood up," Terrence said, raising his voice slightly over the rain. "Do you need help? I can call a tow truck or a mechanic." The woman looked at him for a long moment. Then she spoke. Her voice was calm, low, direct. "I do not need a tow truck, and I do not need a mechanic." She wiped rain from her forehead with the back of her scarred hand. "I am the mechanic." Terrence blinked. "You are the what?" "The alternator belt is worn down," she said, like she was reading a grocery list. "It has been slipping for about 2 weeks. I have been waiting on a replacement. Found one at a salvage yard in College Park yesterday. I am putting it on now." Terrence stared at her. Most people, when they talk about car trouble, they wave their hands and say things like, "It is making a funny noise." This woman just gave him a textbook diagnosis in under 10 seconds. Now, Here is something most people do not know. The alternator belt, sometimes called the serpentine belt, is what keeps your car's electrical system alive. It powers the alternator, which charges the battery while the engine runs. When that belt starts to slip or wear out, you will notice your headlights dimming, your battery warning light flickering, and eventually your car will just die. Replacing one is not cheap at a shop, usually somewhere between $200 and $400 with labor, but if you know what you are doing, the part itself costs maybe $30 to $50. This woman knew exactly what she was doing. "I appreciate it," she continued, already starting to slide back under the car. "But I have got this." "Hold on," Terrence said. He did not know why he was pushing it. Any other night, he would have shrugged and driven away. But those hands, that voice, the way she said alternator belt, like she had said it 1,000 times before. "Are you sure it is pouring out here? I can at least give you a ride somewhere while you wait." She stopped, looked at him again. Something flickered in her eyes, not anger, not gratitude, something more tired than both. "Sir, I am not waiting. I am working, and I cannot afford to wait. I need this car running in the next 20 minutes so I can get to my second shift." Second shift. That meant she had already worked one job today. And here she was lying in the rain under a broken car at 8:30 on a Friday night, fixing it herself so she could go work another one. Then, from inside the car, a small voice. Quiet, almost swallowed by the rain. "Mama, I am cold." Everything stopped. Terrence looked at the back seat. The little boy was hugging his backpack tighter now. His breath fogged up the window in small circles. He was shivering. Nadine closed her eyes for a second. Just 1 second, like she was holding something inside that she could not afford to let out. "I know, baby," she said softly. "Mama is almost done. Just a few more minutes." Terrence did not think. He walked back to his Bentley, opened the back door, and pulled out his overcoat. It was cashmere. Cost about $4,000. He walked back to the Civic and opened the rear door gently. The little boy looked up at him with wide eyes. "Here," Terrence said, holding out the coat. "Put this around you. It will keep you warm." The boy looked at the coat, then looked toward the front of the car where his mother was working. He did not take it. Nadine slid out from under the car again. She saw the coat. She saw Terrence standing there by the open door. Her face hardened. "I told you, I do not need your help." "This is not for you," Terrence said quietly. "It is for him." Nadine looked at her son. Isaiah was shivering now, his small fingers gripping the straps of his backpack. She stared at the coat in Terrence's hand. Cashmere. Clean. Warm. Everything. She could not give her boy right now. She swallowed hard. "Fine," she said, just the one word. She took the coat from Terrence's hand without touching his fingers and wrapped it around Isaiah's shoulders. The boy sank into it, immediately pulling it tight, around himself like a blanket. "What do you say, Isaiah?" Nadine said. "Thank you, sir," the boy whispered. Terrence nodded. He looked at Nadine. She was already turning back toward the engine. He wanted to say something else. He wanted to ask her name. He wanted to ask why a woman who clearly knew more about cars than half his engineering team was out here in the rain at night fixing a 15-year-old Civic so she could get to a second job. But Nadine did not give him the chance. She slid back under the car and picked up her wrench. The conversation was over. So Terrence stood there, in the rain, watching. He watched her work for another 12 minutes without saying a word. She replaced the belt, tested the tension with her fingers, checked the alignment twice, and then slid out one final time. She stood up, wiped her hands on her pants, walked to the driver's side door, leaned in, and turned the key. The engine coughed once, then caught, then settled into a steady idle. Nadine listened to it for a few seconds, her head tilted slightly, the way a doctor listens to a heartbeat. She nodded once to herself. It was good. She closed the hood and looked at Terrence one last time. "Thank you for the coat," she said. "Not warm, not cold. Just honest. You can keep it," Terrence said. "I will wash it and leave it at the Citgo on Langford Parkway," she replied. "You can pick it up there if you want it back." She did not ask for his name. She did not offer hers. She got in the car. She closed the door. And she drove away. Terrence stood on the side of the road in the rain and watched her taillights disappear around a curve. One working taillight. Fading into the dark, he did not move for a long time. The rain soaked through to his skin. His shoes were ruined. His shirt clung to his chest. He did not care about any of it. Because Terrence Brooks had seen something on that roadside that he could not shake. It was not her poverty. He had seen poverty before. It was not her stubbornness. He had met stubborn people his whole life. It was her hands. Those scars were not old. They were not faded. They were the kind of scars that come from something violent and sudden. A fire, an explosion, something that had tried to destroy those hands. And it had failed. Because those hands still worked, still moved with a skill that most trained professionals never reach. Who was this woman? Where did she learn to do that? And why was someone with that level of ability fixing a rusted Civic on the side of the road in the rain? On a Friday night, Terrence drove home on autopilot. He barely remembered the route. He walked into his house, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a kitchen he never used, and sat down at his desk without turning on the lights. He opened his laptop and stared at the screen. He tried searching. Female mechanic, South Atlanta. Nothing useful. Automotive technician, Hapeville area. Nothing. He did not know her name. He did not know where she worked. He did not have a license plate number. He had nothing. But Terrence Brooks had not built a billion-dollar company by giving up when the answer was not obvious. He had spent his entire career finding parts that nobody else could find, solving problems that nobody else could solve, connecting pieces that nobody else even knew were missing. He closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair. He would find her. He did not know how yet, but he would find her. To understand who Nadine Coleman was on that rainy roadside, you have to go back before the rain, before Atlanta, before the scars, back to Detroit. Nadine grew up on the east side, Gratiot Avenue, the kind of neighborhood where front porches sagged and the streetlights only worked half the time. Her mother, Gloria, worked double shifts at a laundry facility. Her father, Curtis, owned a 1-bay garage on a side street off East Warren. Coleman Auto Repair. Hand-painted sign. Concrete floor stained with 30 years of oil. Curtis Coleman was not a rich man. He was not a famous man. But he could listen to an engine the way a musician listens to a song. He could hear what was wrong before he even popped the hood. And from the time Nadine was old enough to hold a flashlight, he brought her into that garage with him. Most kids grew up with bedtime stories. Nadine grew up with the sound of ratchets and the smell of motor oil. By the time she was 8, she could name every part under a hood. By 12, she could change brake pads by herself. By 15, she was rebuilding carburetors on Saturday mornings, while other girls her age were at the mall. Her hands back then were small, too small for most of the tools. She used to wrap electrical tape around the handles of her father's wrenches so they would not slip out of her grip. Curtis would watch her and shake his head and smile. "Girl," he would say, "you got better hands than half the men who come through this shop." He was right. After high school, Nadine enrolled in an automotive technology program at a community college in Dearborn. She graduated top of her class. Then she did something most people in her neighborhood never got the chance to do. She got hired at a full-scale automobile assembly plant just outside Detroit. Not as a line worker, as an automotive diagnostic technician. Now, if you do not know what that is, let me explain. An automotive diagnostic technician is the person who figures out what is wrong with a vehicle when nobody else can. They use computer systems, electronic scanners, and years of hands-on knowledge to trace problems that are invisible to the naked eye. Think of it like being a doctor, but for machines. It requires training, certification, and a kind of instinct that cannot be taught in a classroom. In the United States, less than 2% of automotive technicians are women, and even fewer are black women. When Nadine walked onto that factory floor for the first time, she was 23 years old, 5'6", and the only woman in a department of 47 men. Some of them laughed. Some of them ignored her. A few made bets on how long she would last. One senior tech told her on her first day, "Sweetheart, "The break room is down the hall. You sure you are in the right place?" Nadine did not argue. She did not complain. She just went to work. And within 6 months, she had diagnosed and resolved more electrical faults than anyone else on the team. The men stopped laughing. A few of them started coming to her for advice. Her supervisor put her name on the wall in the break room, Employee of the Quarter, twice in a row. Her hands by then were no longer the hands of a girl wrapping tape around wrenches. They were the hands of a professional, calloused at the fingertips, a small scar on her left thumb from a slip screwdriver, grease under the nails that never fully came out no matter how hard she scrubbed. That is where she met Darnell Coleman. He worked in the electrical maintenance division of the same plant. Tall, quiet, the kind of man who fixed things without making a fuss about it. He noticed Nadine before she noticed him. He told his friend later that the first time he saw her, she was elbow deep inside a dashboard tracing a wiring fault, and she was humming a gospel song like she was sitting in church instead of lying under a steering column. He asked her out 3 times before she said yes. Their first date was at a rib joint on Michigan Avenue. They talked for 4 hours. He walked her to her car, and she noticed his shoes were untied. She knelt down and tied them for him. He laughed and said, "I think I am in trouble." They got married 14 months later. Small ceremony. Her father walked her down the aisle with oil still under his fingernails. They moved into a 2-bedroom house in Redford Township. It was not big. The kitchen was tiny, and the backyard was mostly dirt. But it was theirs. When Isaiah was born, Nadine cut her hours at the plant so she could be home more. She would sit in the nursery with the baby on her chest and read him her automotive repair manuals out loud. Darnell would stand in the doorway and shake his head. "You are going to turn that boy into a mechanic before he can walk." Nadine would smile. Worse things to be. On Sunday afternoons, she would bring Isaiah to the garage, sit him on the workbench in his little car seat. He would watch her with big round eyes while she worked. She taught him to count by lining up bolts on the bench. 1 bolt, 2 bolts, 3 bolts. He loved it. Her hands in those days wore a thin gold wedding band that always had a smudge of grease on it. She never took it off, not even when she slept. Darnell used to joke that the ring was more oil than gold by now. Nadine would hold up her hand and look at it and say, "That is how you know it is loved." Life was not perfect. Money was tight sometimes. The furnace broke in January, and they could not fix it for 2 weeks. But they had each other. They had Isaiah. They had a plan. Darnell was studying for a supervisor certification. Nadine was saving for her ASE Master Technician credential. They were building something, slowly, carefully, the way people build things when they know no one is going to hand it to them. But here is the thing about plans. They do not care about what you deserve. And sometimes, the worst day of your life does not send a warning first. It was a Tuesday, March 14th. Nadine remembers the date the way you remember a scar. Not because you want to, because your body will not let you forget. The morning started like any other. Darnell kissed her at the front door. Isaiah was eating cereal at the kitchen table, milk dripping down his chin. Darnell ruffled the boy's hair and said, "Be good for Mama." Then he drove to the plant. Nadine was working a half shift that day. She dropped Isaiah at her mother-in-law's house and headed in around 10. The plant was loud as always. Machines humming, forklifts beeping, the smell of metal and coolant thick in the air. At 1:47 in the afternoon, the fire alarm went off. Now fire alarms went off at that plant more often than they should have. Usually, it was a false trigger, a sensor glitch. Everyone would file out, wait 10 minutes, and go back inside. But this time was different. This time, the alarm did not stop. And then came the smoke. It started in the electrical maintenance wing, the section of the plant where Darnell worked. Later, investigators would determine that a junction box in the east corridor had overheated due to corroded wiring that had not been replaced in over 12 years. The plant's own safety inspection report from 8 months earlier had flagged that exact junction box as a fire hazard. The report recommended immediate replacement. Management filed the report and did nothing. In the United States, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, known as OSHA, requires employers to maintain safe working conditions and address known hazards. When a company ignores its own safety reports to save money, that is not just negligence. That is a choice. A choice that puts human lives below profit margins. And every year, thousands of American workers pay the price for choices like that. The fire spread fast, faster than anyone expected. The old wiring acted like a fuse. The flames jumped from the junction box to the cable trays overhead, and within minutes, the East Corridor was engulfed. Darnell was in that corridor. Nadine heard about it before the official announcement. A coworker came running into her section face white, shouting that there was a real fire in the East Wing. Nadine dropped her tools and ran. She did not think. She did not wait for instructions. She just ran. When she reached the East Corridor, the heat hit her like a wall. The smoke was black and thick, pouring along the ceiling like a river turned upside down. She could hear the fire roaring behind the doors. 2 firemen were already there, shouting for everyone to stay back. But Nadine heard something else. She heard Darnell's voice, faint, calling from behind the smoke. She did not hesitate. She pushed past the firemen. She pushed through the doors. She reached into the fire with both hands and grabbed Darnell's arm. The heat took her hands first, then her wrists, then her forearms. She felt the skin tighten and split, but she did not let go. She pulled him with everything she had. She dragged him 6 feet toward the exit before the ceiling panel above them buckled, and the firemen finally reached them. They pulled her out. They pulled Darnell out. But it was too late. Darnell had inhaled too much smoke. His lungs were damaged beyond repair. He died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. He was 34 years old. Nadine spent 3 weeks in the burn unit. Both hands, both forearms, 2nd and 3rd degree burns. The doctors told her she might never regain full use of her fingers. She proved them wrong in 4 months. But the burns were just the beginning. When Nadine got out of the hospital, she started asking questions. She found the safety report. She read it cover to cover. She saw the date it was filed. She saw the recommendation. And she saw that nothing had been done. She hired a lawyer. A young woman fresh out of law school who took the case on contingency. They filed a wrongful death claim against the plant. The company's legal team responded with a settlement offer. $75,000. In exchange, Nadine would sign a non-disclosure agreement and waive all future claims. $75,000 for a man's life, for a father, for a husband. Nadine's lawyer advised her to take it. They will drag this out for years, the lawyer said. You have a child, you have medical bills. This is the fastest path to some kind of closure. Nadine took the money. Not because it was fair, because Isaiah needed to eat. 6 months later, the plant laid her off. Restructuring, they called it. Nadine knew the real reason. She had asked too many questions. She had made too much noise. She was a reminder of something the company wanted to forget. The next 5 months were a blur of hospital bills, physical therapy, rejection letters, and empty chairs at the dinner table. The mortgage fell behind. Then it fell further behind. Then the bank sent a letter. Nadine sold what she could. The furniture, Darnell's truck, her tools, the tools her father had given her. That one hurt the most. By the end of the year, there was nothing left to sell and nowhere left to stay. So Nadine packed 1 suitcase for herself and 1 small backpack for Isaiah. She bought 2 Greyhound bus tickets to Atlanta. She chose Atlanta because a woman from her church had a cousin there who said she might be able to help with a place to stay for a few weeks. Nadine stood at the bus station in Detroit on a gray December morning. Isaiah held her hand. He was 4 years old. He did not understand why they were leaving. He just knew Mama said they were going on a trip. Nadine's hands were still wrapped in compression bandages. The scars were still fresh, still pink and raw and angry. She did not cry. She had used up all her tears in the hospital hallway the night Darnell stopped breathing. That was 3 years ago. And this is where Nadine was now. She lived in a 1-bedroom apartment on Lakewood Avenue in South Atlanta. The building was old. The hallway smelled like bleach and fried food. Her apartment had a kitchen, a bathroom, and one room where she and Isaiah shared space. He slept on a twin mattress. She slept on a fold-out couch. The rent was $865 a month. She paid it on time. Every single month, no matter what. Nadine worked 2 jobs. Mornings, she was a prep cook at a diner on Pryor Street. She started at 5:30 cutting onions, washing lettuce, stacking plates. The work was hot and fast, and the pay was $12.50 an hour. She finished at 1. Evenings, she cleaned offices at a shopping center off Cleveland Avenue. She started at 6 and finished around 10:30. The pay was $11.75 an hour. She mopped floors, scrubbed toilets, emptied trash cans, and wiped down windows. On a good week, she brought home about $700 before taxes. Neither job used her skills. Neither job knew what her hands could really do, and Nadine never told them. Isaiah was 7 now, 2nd grade at a public elementary school, 10 minutes from the apartment. He was smart, not just bright, smart. He loved science. He loved asking why. Why does the engine make that sound? Why is the sky blue at noon and orange at sunset? Why do batteries die? Nadine answered every question with patience and precision, the same way her father once answered hers. After school, Isaiah went to a free program at the church on the corner. They gave him a snack, helped with homework, and let him play until Nadine picked him up at 5:15 on her way to her evening shift. It was not ideal, but it was safe, and safe was enough. The Honda Civic was the thread holding everything together. Without that car, Nadine could not get to the diner by 5:30. She could not get to the cleaning job by 6. She could not pick up Isaiah in between. The bus routes did not connect those 3 points in time. She had checked, she had mapped it. It did not work, so the car had to work, always. That is why she fixed it herself. Not because she enjoyed lying on wet pavement in the rain on a Friday night, but because a mechanic would charge $300 she did not have. And a broken car meant no job, and no job meant no rent. And no rent meant the street. It was that simple. Every Sunday, Nadine walked to the public library on Georgia Avenue. Isaiah sat in the children's section reading picture books, while Nadine sat at a table in the back reading automotive repair manuals. Not because anyone asked her to, because she refused to let her skills die. She kept her mind sharp the same way she kept her hands working. With discipline. She cut Isaiah's hair every 2 weeks using a pair of clippers she bought at a garage sale for $3. She packed his lunch every morning. Turkey sandwich, apple, slices, a juice box. The same thing every day because it was what she could afford. And every month, she put $40 into a small tin can she kept on top of the refrigerator. She called it Isaiah's emergency fund. It was not much, but it was something. It meant that if the worst happened, her son would have a few dollars between him and nothing. Every night after both shifts, Nadine came home, checked on Isaiah, and sat at the kitchen table. She soaked her scarred hands in a bowl of warm water mixed with lotion. Not for vanity, the scar tissue was tight. If she did not stretch it and soften it every single day, her fingers would stiffen, and stiff hands could not hold a wrench. And a wrench was the only thing standing between her son and the street. She would sit there in the quiet apartment, flexing her fingers in the warm water, listening to Isaiah breathe in his sleep, and sometimes, just sometimes, she would look at her hands and remember what they used to be, what they used to build, what they used to fix. Then she would dry them off, turn out the light, and go to sleep on the fold-out couch. Because tomorrow started at 4:45, and tomorrow did not wait for anyone. That Monday morning, Terrence Brooks sat in his office on the 14th floor of the Brooks Automotive headquarters in Buckhead. He had not slept well all weekend. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the same thing. Scarred hands, moving in the rain, precise and steady under a busted hood. He called his assistant into his office. Her name was Denise. She had worked for him for 9 years, and she knew when something was off. "You look terrible," she said. "Thank you, Denise. I need you to find someone for me." He described the car. A blue 2009 Honda Civic. One working taillight. He described the location. South side of Hapeville, near Langford Parkway. Friday night, around 8:30. Denise raised an eyebrow. Should I ask why? No. Denise was good at her job. Within 48 hours, she had pulled security footage from a gas station a quarter mile from where Terrence had stopped. The footage showed the Civic pulling in and out of the lot. The license plate was just clear enough to read. She ran it through a contact at the DMV. The car was registered to a Nadine Coleman, address on Lakewood Avenue, South Atlanta. Terrence typed the name into his laptop, Nadine Coleman. The first few results were nothing. A social media profile with no photo, a white pages listing. Then he found it. A news article from the Detroit Free Press, 3 years old. The headline read, "Worker killed in factory fire family seeks answers." There was a photo with the article. A man named Darnell Coleman, 34 years old, electrical maintenance technician, killed in a fire at an auto assembly plant caused by faulty wiring that had been flagged months earlier and never repaired. Terrence read every word. He read about the fire. He read about the failed safety inspection. He read about the settlement, $75,000. He read about the wife who had been burned trying to save her husband, a wife named Nadine. His chest felt tight. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the screen. Then he clicked on another link. A follow-up article about the plant's supplier contracts. The electrical components in the East Corridor, the ones that had corroded and started the fire, were manufactured by a company called Prestige Electrical Systems, based in Ohio. Specialized in industrial wiring harnesses and junction assemblies, Terrence knew that name. He opened another tab and pulled up Brooks Automotive's vendor database. He typed in Prestige Electrical Systems and hit enter. The screen loaded, and there it was. A distribution agreement signed 3 months ago. Exclusive regional partnership. Brooks Automotive Group was now the sole distributor of Prestige electrical products across the southeastern United States. Terrence stared at the screen. He did not blink. He did not move. His company had not caused the fire. He knew that. He had never even heard of that plant in Detroit until 5 minutes ago. But his company was now doing business with the same supplier whose defective products had burned down a building and killed a man. And the woman who had lost everything because of it was living 10 miles away fixing cars in the rain to feed her son. He closed the laptop slowly. He stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the Atlanta skyline. Cranes and glass and money. Everywhere he looked, money. Terrence had spent his entire career building a company that moved parts from one place to another. He had never stopped to think about what those parts cost in human lives. He was thinking about it now. 3 days later, Terrence walked into a diner on Pryor Street at 6:15 in the morning. He did not drive the Bentley. He came in a plain black Ford Explorer he kept for site visits. He wore jeans, a gray pullover, and work boots. No watch, no cufflinks. He looked like any other man stopping for breakfast before a long day. The diner was small, 12 tables, a long counter with red vinyl stools, the kind of place where the coffee is always hot and nobody asks your last name. A bell jingled when he pushed through the door. The smell of bacon grease and burnt toast filled the air. He sat down at a corner table and waited. A waitress brought him a menu. He ordered black coffee and a side of toast. He did not touch either one. Then he saw her. Nadine came through the kitchen door carrying a tray of sliced tomatoes. She wore a white apron over a plain black shirt. Her hair was pulled back under a net. Her scarred hands gripped the tray the way they gripped everything. Steady, sure. She set the tray on the prep counter and turned to grab another one. That is when she saw him. She stopped mid-step. Her whole body went rigid. She stared at him across the diner like she was looking at a ghost. Then her eyes narrowed. She walked over to his table. Not fast, not slow, controlled. She stood in front of him and kept her voice low so the other workers would not hear. "How did you find me?" Terrence looked up at her. He did not smile. He did not try to charm her. "I looked for you," he said simply. "I needed to talk to you. You needed to talk to me." She repeated it flat, like a sentence with no question mark. "About what?" "About your hands." Nadine's jaw tightened. "My hands are none of your business. You are right, Terrence said. They are not. But I know what those hands can do, and I know they are not being used the way they should be. Nadine crossed her arms. You do not know anything about me. I know your name is Nadine Coleman, Terrence said quietly. I know you were an automotive diagnostic technician at an assembly plant outside Detroit. I know you were one of the best they had. I know about the fire, and I know about Darnell. The moment he said that name, something in Nadine's face cracked open. Not sadness, something sharper, something hot. Her nostrils flared, her voice dropped to barely a whisper. Do not you dare say his name. You did not know him. You do not get to say his name like you understand. Terrence held her gaze. He did not flinch. You are right. I did not know him. But I read about what happened, and I know it was not your fault. And I know that what they did to you after was worse than the fire itself. Nadine looked away. Her chest rose and fell. She blinked hard, once, twice. She was fighting something she did not want this stranger to see. What do you want? She said finally. Terrence reached into his jacket and pulled out a plain white envelope. He set it on the table and slid it toward her. Open it. Nadine stared at the envelope for a long moment. Then she picked it up and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A job offer, printed on Brooks Automotive Group letterhead. The position was Diagnostic Technician Level 3. The salary was $68,000 a year. Full health insurance for her and one dependent. And at the bottom, a note about a tuition assistance program for employees pursuing ASE Master Certification. Nadine read it. Then she read it again. Then she set the paper down on the table and looked at Terrence. Why? Because I run the largest automotive parts company in the Southeast, Terrence said. And the most talented technician I have ever seen is cutting tomatoes in a diner for $12 an hour. That does not make sense to me. It is not about making sense, Nadine said. Her voice was harder now. I trusted a company once, a big one, with nice offices and important people, and they took my husband from me. Then they took my job. Then they took my house. I gave them everything, and they left me with these. She held up her hands. The scars caught the fluorescent light. So forgive me if I am not jumping at the chance to trust another one. Terrence nodded slowly. I understand that, and I am not asking you to trust me. I am not asking you to trust my company. He paused. I am asking you to give your hands the job they deserve. The words hit Nadine like a brick to the chest. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked down at the paper again. Then she looked at her hands. Those scarred, burned, brilliant hands. She folded the paper carefully, put it back in the envelope, and set it on the table. I need to get back to work, she said, and she turned and walked into the kitchen without looking back. Terrence left a $20 bill next to his untouched coffee and walked out of the diner. The envelope stayed on the table. He did not take it with him. That night, Nadine sat at the small kitchen table in her apartment. The envelope was in front of her. She had picked it up from the diner before her shift ended. She told herself she was just going to throw it away. But she did not throw it away. Isaiah was on the floor beside her, lying on his stomach, coloring a worksheet about the solar system. His tongue stuck out slightly when he concentrated. He looked up at her. Mama, can I ask you something? You can always ask me something. Why do your hands always hurt? Nadine blinked. She looked at her son. He was staring at her hands. She had been rubbing them without realizing it, kneading the scar tissue the way she did every night when the tightness set in. They do not always hurt, baby, she said. Yes, they do, Isaiah said simply. The way children say things, no filter, just truth. You always rub them at night. And sometimes, when you pick me up from church, I can see you squeezing them in the car like they are stiff. Nadine felt something sharp in her throat. She swallowed it down. They got hurt a long time ago, before we moved here, but they still work fine. Mama's hands are strong. Isaiah looked at them for a moment. Then he said, Daddy used to say your hands could fix anything. The room went quiet. Nadine stared at her son. He was 7. He had been 4 when Darnell died. She did not think he remembered that much. But children remember more than we think, especially the things said with love. She heard Darnell's voice in her mind, clear as the day he said it, standing in their kitchen in Redford watching her reassemble a carburetor on the counter. He had shaken his head and laughed. Girl, those hands could rebuild the whole world if someone gave you the parts. Nadine looked at the envelope. She looked at Isaiah. She looked at the apartment, the fold-out couch, the cracked ceiling, the tin can on the refrigerator with $40 in it. She thought about the diner, $12.50 an hour, tomatoes and toast. She thought about the cleaning job, $11.75 an hour, mop water and bleach. Then she thought about the way it felt to hold a diagnostic scanner, the way it felt to trace a wiring fault and find the answer, the way it felt to hear an engine come back to life because her hands had found the problem. She picked up the envelope and pulled out the paper one more time. At the bottom below the job details, there was a phone number, handwritten. Next to it, one line. Whenever you are ready, no pressure, no deadline. Nadine folded the paper again. She sat there for a long time after Isaiah fell asleep on the floor. She carried him to his bed, tucked the blanket around him, and kissed his forehead. Then she went back to the kitchen table. At 6:45 the next morning, before her shift at the diner, Nadine picked up her phone and dialed the number on the paper. It rang 3 times. Then a voice answered, Terrence Brooks. "This is Nadine," she said. Her voice was steady. "I will take the job." She did not call because she trusted Terrence Brooks. She called because she trusted her own hands. On her first day at Brooks Automotive, Nadine arrived 30 minutes early. She took the bus because her Civic was making a sound she did not like and she did not want to risk it breaking down. She wore dark pants, a clean button-down shirt, and the only pair of closed-toe shoes she owned, black. What? Scuffed, but polished. The Brooks Automotive Technical Center was located in an industrial park near the airport. It was nothing like the diner or the shopping center. The building was modern, clean lines, glass, and steel. Inside, the diagnostic bays were spotless. Each one had computerized scanning equipment, hydraulic lifts, and tool stations that cost more than everything Nadine had owned in the past 3 years combined. She stood in the doorway of the main bay and looked around. Technicians in matching navy blue uniforms moved between vehicles with tablets and scanners. Monitors displayed real-time data feeds from engines. The air smelled like new rubber and synthetic coolant. It smelled like the work she was born to do. Her supervisor was a man named Gerald Whitfield, 50 years old, broad shoulders, gray hair cut short. He had been running the technical division for 11 years, and he did not like surprises. When Denise from the front office brought Nadine to meet him, Gerald looked her up and down without smiling. "So you are the one the boss brought in personally," he said. It was not a question. "I am the new diagnostic technician," Nadine replied. Gerald grunted. "We will see about that." He turned and pointed across the bay. "You see that silver Expedition over there? Customer brought it in 2 days ago. Intermittent stalling at highway speeds. My guys have been on it for 16 hours. Checked the fuel system, checked the ignition, checked the sensors. Cannot find the fault." He looked at her. "Let us see what the CEO's charity case can do." The other technicians stopped what they were doing. Some of them pretended not to watch, but they were all watching. Nadine did not respond to the comment. She walked over to the Expedition, set her bag down, and got to work. She started where any good diagnostician starts. She plugged in the OBD2 scanner and pulled the trouble codes. There were 3 stored codes, all related to the transmission control module. The previous techs had cleared them and focused on the fuel system. Nadine did not clear them. She read them. Now here is something most people do not know. The Transmission Control Module, or TCM, is the computer that manages your vehicle's automatic transmission. It decides when to shift gears, how much pressure to apply, and how to respond to changes in speed and load. When the TCM has a firmware glitch, it can cause the transmission to behave unpredictably, stalling at highway speed, rough shifting, delayed engagement. The tricky part is that a firmware issue does not always show up as a hardware fault. If you are only checking physical components, you will never find it. It is like looking for a plumbing leak when the real problem is in the software that controls the water pressure. Nadine knew this. She had seen it before. Twice, back in Detroit. She connected a secondary diagnostic tool directly to the TCM and ran a firmware version check. The module was running an outdated version that had a known bug. The manufacturer had issued a recall update 7 months ago. It had never been applied to this vehicle. She stood up and walked back to Gerald. "It is the TCM," she said. "Firmware version 3.2. There is a known stalling defect. It needs the 4.1 update. You will also want to check the adaptive shift tables because the old firmware may have written bad data to the transmission memory." Gerald stared at her. He did not say a word for about 5 seconds. Then he looked at the tablet in her hand. Then he looked at the expedition. Then he looked back at her. "How long did that take you?" he asked. "About 45 minutes, Nadine said. One of the younger technicians in the back let out a low whistle. Gerald's face did not change, but something behind his eyes shifted. Something that looked a lot like a man realizing he had underestimated someone badly. "Get it updated," he said, "and write up the report." Nadine nodded and went back to work. Nobody called her the CEO's charity case again after that, at least not to her face. Over the next 2 months, Nadine became the person everyone came to when something did not make sense. The car that kept overheating even after the radiator was replaced. The truck that threw a check engine light every Tuesday, but never any other day. The sedan with the phantom electrical drain that 3 different techs had failed to trace. Nadine solved them all. She worked quietly. She did not brag. She did not talk about her past unless someone asked. She arrived early. She stayed until the job was done. She treated every vehicle like it mattered, because to her it did. Every car she fixed meant someone could get to work. Someone could pick up their kids. Someone could keep their life running. She understood that better than anyone. The other technicians started warming up to her. A young tech named Devon, 24 years old, fresh out of trade school, started asking her questions during lunch breaks. How did she trace that wiring fault so fast? What scanner settings did she use for intermittent misfires? Nadine answered every question patiently, the way her father used to answer hers in the garage on East Warren. She called Isaiah every day at 12:15. FaceTime. He would show her his drawings or tell her about what he learned in science class. One day, he held up a picture he had drawn of a car engine. It was messy. The proportions were all wrong, but every part was labeled correctly. Alternator, battery, radiator, serpentine belt. Nadine laughed and said, "Baby, that is the most beautiful engine I have ever seen." She kept to herself mostly. She ate lunch alone at her workstation. She did not go to the break room. She was polite but guarded. Some of the office staff whispered about her. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why did the CEO personally hire a technician? That never happened. But the whispers stayed whispers, because Nadine's work spoke louder than any rumor. Terrence watched all of it from a distance. He read Gerald's weekly performance reports. Nadine's name appeared more than anyone else's. Resolved cases, diagnostic accuracy, customer satisfaction scores. She was the best technician in the building, and everyone knew it. Sometimes, Terrence found reasons to walk through the technical center. He told himself it was routine. CEOs should know their operations. He told himself he was checking on equipment, reviewing workflow. But the truth was simpler than that. He was looking for Nadine. He would see her bent over an engine bay scanner in hand, her scarred fingers tracing a wire harness with the same steady precision he had watched on that rainy roadside. He would see her talking to Devon, explaining something with her hands, drawing invisible diagrams in the air. He would see her sitting at her workstation at 12:15, smiling at her phone while Isaiah's voice echoed faintly from the speaker. And something in Terrence's chest would tighten, something warm and steady and terrifying. Terrence was falling for her. Not for the way she looked, though. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with clothes or makeup. Her beauty was in the way she moved, deliberate, unhurried, like someone who had learned that rushing only breaks things. He was falling for the way she carried her pain without letting it define her. He was falling for the way she said Darnell's name when Devon once asked about her wedding ring. She said it the way you say a prayer, with reverence, without bitterness. He was falling for all of it, but Terrence did not act on it. He could not. He was the CEO. She was an employee. He had personally brought her into the company. Any move he made would be questioned. It would look like he had hired her for the wrong reasons. It would undermine everything she had earned. And she had earned it. Every single day she had earned it. So Terrence kept his distance. He stopped walking through the technical center. He stopped reading her performance reports. He tried to focus on quarterly numbers and board meetings and distribution logistics. But every night when he drove home alone in his Bentley past the same stretch of road where he had first seen her lying under that Honda in the rain, he thought about her hands. Those scarred, beautiful, unbreakable hands. And he wondered if there would ever be a right time to tell her what he felt. Or if the right thing to do was to never tell her at all. It happened on a Wednesday. An ordinary Wednesday. The kind of day that starts like every other day and then splits your life into before and after. Nadine was in the receiving bay. A new shipment of electrical components had arrived that morning. 14 pallets. Standard inventory rotation. Gerald was gone by, then replaced by a new supervisor named Karen Price, who was competent and fair, and left Nadine alone to do her work. It was a good arrangement. Nadine's job that morning was to spot-check the incoming parts against the quality spec sheets. She did this every time a shipment came in. It was not officially part of her role. She just did it, because she knew what bad parts could do. She picked up a box from the first pallet. White cardboard, sealed with clear tape. She turned it over to check the label. Part number, batch code, country of origin, and the manufacturer's logo. She stopped. Her fingers went still on the cardboard. Her breath caught somewhere between her chest and her throat. She stared at the logo printed in dark blue ink on the side of the box. Prestige Electrical Systems, Est, 1987. Dayton, Ohio. She knew that logo. She knew it the way you know a face from a nightmare. Not because you want to remember, because your body will not let you forget. That logo had been printed on the junction box in the east corridor of a factory in Detroit. The junction box with the corroded wiring. The one the safety report flagged 8 months before the fire. The one management chose not to replace. The one that sparked and caught and burned and killed her husband. Nadine set the box down slowly. Her hands were shaking. She looked at the next pallet. Same logo. She looked at the third pallet. Same logo. She walked down the row. Every single pallet in that shipment carried the Prestige name. She pulled out her tablet and opened the Brooks Automotive Vendor Management System. She searched Prestige Electrical Systems. The results loaded in 3 seconds. What she saw made her stomach drop. Brooks Automotive had not just placed a one-time order with Prestige. They had signed an exclusive regional distribution agreement 4 months ago. Brooks was now the sole distributor of Prestige products across 8 states in the southeastern United States. That meant every junction box, every wiring harness, every electrical connector that Prestige manufactured for this region passed through Brooks Automotive warehouses before reaching shops and installers and vehicles. Terrence's company was putting Prestige parts into thousands of cars. Across the entire Southeast, Nadine's mind was racing now. She opened the internal quality control database. Every vendor had a file. She pulled up Prestige. There were 6 quarterly inspection reports on record. She opened the most recent one, dated 2 months ago, signed at the bottom by Gerald Whitfield. The report showed something that made Nadine's blood go cold. The defect rate on 3 Prestige product lines was above the industry standard threshold. One product, a wiring junction connector, had a failure rate of 4.7%. Industry standard maximum was 2%. Gerald had flagged it in the notes section. He had written failure rate elevated, but within acceptable commercial tolerance, given 15% cost savings versus alternate supplier. Acceptable commercial tolerance. That phrase hit Nadine like a freight train. She had seen language like that before. In the safety report from the Detroit plant. Different words, same meaning. The parts are not great. But they are cheap, so we will use them anyway. She opened the next report. Same pattern. Elevated defect rates. Same sign-off. Gerald had approved every single shipment. And he had done it because Prestige was cheaper than the competition. Nadine closed the tablet. She sat down on a crate in the receiving bay and pressed her scarred hands against her face. She could feel the ridge of scar tissue against her cheekbones. She could feel her pulse in her fingertips, fast, hard, like her body was sounding an alarm that nobody else could hear. She thought about Terrence. She thought about the night in the diner. I am asking you to give your hands the job they deserve. She thought about the way he looked at her. The way he seemed like someone different from the men in suits she had known before. But then she thought about something else. Terrence had told her he knew about Detroit. He knew about the fire. He knew about Darnell. He had looked her in the eyes and said, I know it was not your fault. And the whole time his company was doing business with the same supplier whose products had started that fire. Did he know? Had he known the whole time? Was this why he hired her? Not because he believed in her hands, but because he wanted to keep her close, keep her quiet, make sure the woman whose husband was killed by Prestige parts was on his payroll instead of in a courtroom. Nadine felt something break inside her chest. Not sadness this time, something harder, something colder. The kind of feeling that comes when you realize you have been a fool twice. She picked up the tablet again. She screenshot the quality reports. She screenshot the vendor agreement. She saved them to her personal drive. Then she set the tablet on the workbench, stood up, and walked out of the receiving bay. She did not go to Karen. She did not go to Denise. She walked straight to the elevator and pressed the button for the 14th floor. The doors to Terrence's office were open. He was behind his desk, reading something on his screen. He looked up when she walked in. For a half second, his face lit up the way it always did when he saw her. Then he saw her expression, and the light went out. Nadine placed the printed quality reports on his desk. She did not sit down. Did you know? 2 words. That was all she said. Terrence looked at the papers. He picked up the first one. His eyes moved across the page. She watched his face change. First confusion, then recognition, then something that looked like someone had kicked him in the stomach. Where did you get this? He asked. Your own system. Gerald signed off on every shipment. The defect rates are double the industry standard, and the supplier is Prestige Electrical Systems. She paused. Let the name land. The same company that made the parts that started the fire that killed my husband. Terrence set the paper down. He looked at her. Nadine, I did not know about these reports. I did not know Gerald was approving substandard parts. But you knew about Prestige, Nadine said. Her voice was steady, controlled, like a wire pulled so tight it was about to snap. You told me yourself. You read about the fire. You knew what company made those junction boxes. And you still signed a distribution deal with them. The deal was already in progress when I found out about Detroit, Terrence said. I should have reviewed it more carefully. I should have flagged it. I did not. That is on me. That is on you, Nadine repeated, and on Gerald, and on whatever board of directors approved it. Meanwhile, right now, today, your trucks are delivering those same parts to shops all over the Southeast, and someone is going to install them. In someone's car, in someone's home, near someone's family. Terrence stood up. I will fix this. I will pull the contract. I will audit every shipment. I have heard this before, Nadine said. And her voice finally cracked. Not a lot, just enough to let the pain through. A company says they did not know. They promise to do better. Then they settle. Then they move on. Then somebody else dies. She looked at her hands. Then she looked at him. I will not be part of it. Not again. She turned and walked out of his office. Terrence called her name. She did not stop. She took the elevator down to the technical floor. She went to her workstation. She opened her locker. She put her personal tools in her bag. She placed her employee badge on the workbench. Devon saw her packing up and walked over. Nadine, what is going on? Where are you going? She looked at him, the kid who had asked her 100 questions over the past 2 months. who reminded her a little bit of herself at that age. "Take care of yourself, Devon," she said. "And always check the parts before you install them. Always." She walked out of the building, through the parking lot, past the security gate. She did not look back. Terrence stood at his office window and watched her cross the parking lot below. He watched her reach the bus stop. He watched her sit down on the bench in the afternoon sun, with her bag on her lap, and he watched the bus pull up and take her away. Then he turned around. He picked up the quality reports from his desk and read every page again. He pulled up the vendor management system on his computer and found the Prestige contract. He read every clause. He opened the inspection files and traced Gerald's approvals back to the beginning of the partnership. The pattern was clear. Gerald had been cutting corners on quality checks for months, and nobody had caught it because nobody was looking. But someone was looking now. Here is something worth understanding about how companies work. In the United States, supply chain accountability is one of the most overlooked areas in business. A company can have the best engineers, the best facilities, the best reputation. But if the parts coming through their supply chain are defective, none of that matters. The end customer does not know where the part came from. They just know it failed. And when an electrical component fails, it does not just cause an inconvenience. It can cause a fire. It can cause an accident. It can cost a life. This is not a hypothetical. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, defective auto parts contribute to thousands of recalls every year in America. And many of those defects trace back to suppliers who cut costs on materials testing or manufacturing standards. The companies distributing those parts have a responsibility to verify quality, not just once, every time. Terrence Brooks had failed at that responsibility, and he knew it. He picked up his phone and called an emergency board meeting for the following morning. The board gathered at 9. 7 members, 2 of them on video. The room was tense. Emergency meetings meant bad news. Terrence did not soften it. He laid out the Prestige quality data. He showed the defect rates. He showed Gerald's sign-offs. He showed the connection to the Detroit factory fire. He told them everything. The room went quiet. Then the pushback started. "Terrence, this is one supplier with a slightly elevated defect rate. It is not a crisis." That was Howard, the longest-serving board member. "You are overreacting. A man died," Terrence said flatly, "because of parts made by this same company. That was a different product line, a different facility. You cannot hold our entire distribution agreement hostage over one incident in another state." Another board member leaned forward. "Be honest, Terrence. Is this about the woman, the technician you hired? Because if you are letting one employee's personal grudge drive a multi-million-dollar business decision, we have a fiduciary problem." Terrence looked at him. Then he looked at the entire table. He spoke slowly. "If one woman's loss cannot change how we do business, then we do not deserve to be in business." The room went silent. Terrence continued. "Effective immediately, we are terminating the exclusive distribution agreement with Prestige Electrical Systems. We are initiating a full quality audit of every supplier in our network. And Gerald Whitfield has been terminated for approving substandard parts in violation of our internal quality standards." Howard shook his head. "This will cost us millions. And doing nothing could cost someone their life. I will take the millions." Within 48 hours, Terrence had done 4 things. He canceled the Prestige contract. He fired Gerald with cause and referred the quality violations to the company's legal team. He hired an independent safety auditing firm to review every supplier partnership Brooks Automotive held, and he contacted the law firm that had represented the families affected by the Detroit fire. He offered Brooks Automotive's resources to support their ongoing cases, not because he was legally obligated, because it was the right thing to do. It cost the company $4.2 million in the first quarter alone. Stock analysts downgraded Brooks Automotive for the short term. 2 board members threatened to resign. Terrence did not flinch, because every time he thought about backing down, he saw the same thing. Scarred hands, moving in the rain, precise and unbreakable. The hands of a woman who had already paid the price that his industry was still pretending did not exist. 3 weeks passed, 21 days. Terrence counted every one of them. He drove to the apartment on Lakewood Avenue on a Saturday morning. The building looked the same: cracked paint, narrow hallway. He knocked on her door. A woman answered. Not Nadine, a stranger, young, tired-looking. I just moved in last week, she said. I do not know who lived here before. Terrence went to the diner on Pryor Street. The manager, a heavy-set man with a stained apron, shook his head. Nadine, she quit 2 weeks ago. Did not even finish her shift. Just said she had to go and walked out. Left her apron on the hook. He tried the cleaning company. Same answer. She had called in and told them she would not be coming back. No forwarding address, no new phone number. The number Terrence had was disconnected. She had vanished. Again. The same way she had vanished from Detroit 3 years before. Quiet. Complete. Like someone pulling a thread out of a fabric so carefully that the fabric does not even know it is missing. But Terrence was not going to let it end like this. Not because of what he felt for her, but because of what he owed her. She had shown him a truth about his own company that could have cost lives, and he had let her walk out the door, carrying that weight alone. He hired the same investigator he had used before. This time the search took longer. Nadine was not using credit cards. She was not posting on social media. She had pulled Isaiah out of his school and re-enrolled him somewhere else. She was moving through the city like a woman who knew how to disappear. It took 11 days. The investigator found a match on a payroll record from a small independent repair shop in Jonesboro, about 20 miles south of Atlanta, a place called Ray's Auto Service. 3-bay garage, hand-painted sign, the kind of shop where the owner still does his own oil changes. Terrence drove there on a Tuesday afternoon. He parked across the street and sat in the car for 10 minutes. He was not sure what he was going to say. He had rehearsed a dozen versions in his head. None of them felt right. He got out of the car. He did not bring flowers. He did not bring money. He carried a cardboard file box, the kind you buy at an office supply store for $4. He walked across the gravel lot and through the open bay door. The shop smelled like motor oil and old rubber. A radio played low in the corner, and there under a lifted Chevy Tahoe was Nadine. Same posture, same steady hands, same focus. Like the last 3 weeks had not happened. She heard his footsteps on the concrete and rolled out on a creeper. When she saw him, her face went flat, not angry, not surprised, just closed. How did you find me? She asked. The same words she had said at the diner, the same tone. The same way I found you last time, Terrence said. I looked. Nadine stood up slowly. She wiped her hands on a rag. She looked at the box in his arms. What is that? Terrence set the box down on the floor between them. This is not an apology, he said. This is a receipt. Nadine looked at him. Then she knelt down and opened the box. Inside were folders, printed documents. She pulled out the first one, a termination letter. Gerald Whitfield, fired for cause, signed by Terrence personally. She pulled out the second, a legal notice of contract termination between Brooks Automotive Group and Prestige Electrical Systems, effective immediately. All shipments halted, all inventory quarantined pending review. She pulled out the third, a wire transfer confirmation. $200,000 sent to the Morrison & Associates law firm in Detroit, the firm representing the families of workers injured or killed in the factory fire. A handwritten note from Terrence was attached. For the families. No strings, no conditions. She pulled out the fourth, a 60-page document. The new Brooks Automotive Supply Chain Safety and Quality Assurance Protocol. Independent third-party audits. Zero-tolerance defect thresholds. Mandatory supplier transparency requirements. Every page initialed by Terrence. Nadine read each document carefully, page by page. Her scarred hands turned the papers slowly. Terrence stood there in silence. He did not rush her. He did not explain. He just waited. When she finished, she sat back on her heels. Her eyes were wet. She did not let the tears fall. But they were there, right at the edge. You really did all of this, she said quietly. Every single page, Terrence said. She looked at him for a long time. Then she looked at her hands. Then she looked at the documents spread out on the concrete floor of a 3-bay garage in Jonesboro. Then a small voice came from the back of the shop. "Mama, who is that?" Isaiah appeared in the doorway of a small office room. He was sitting at a folding table doing homework. Nadine had no after-school program anymore, no church on the corner. She brought him to work because there was nowhere else for him to go. The boy looked at Terrence. He tilted his head. "I know you," Isaiah said. "You are the man who gave Mama the job with the big machines." Terrence felt something crack open in his chest. He knelt down so he was eye level with Isaiah. "That is right," he said. "And your mama was the best person in that whole building." "Then why did she leave?" Isaiah asked. Terrence looked at Nadine. She looked back at him. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Terrence turned back to Isaiah. "Because she found something wrong, and she was brave enough to say so. Even when it was hard, even when it cost her." He paused. "I am the man who is trying to be better because of your mama." Isaiah considered this for a moment with the seriousness that only a 7-year-old can bring to a complicated answer. Then he nodded. "Okay," he said, and he went back to his homework. Nadine wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She looked at Terrence. "I am not coming back to work for you," she said. "I know," Terrence said. "I need time to think, not for you, for me and for Isaiah. Take all the time you need." She nodded. And for the first time in 3 weeks, she did not look like someone running. She looked like someone deciding where to stand. 2 weeks later, Terrence's phone rang. It was a Tuesday morning. He was in a meeting. He saw the number and excused himself immediately. "This is Nadine. I am here," he said. "I have been thinking," she said. Her voice was steady, clear. The voice of someone who had made a decision and was done second-guessing it. "I do not want to come back as a technician." Terrence waited. "You need someone to run supply chain safety. Someone who knows what bad parts look like. Someone who knows what they cost. Not in dollars, in lives." She paused. "I want to build that department. From the ground up, I want to set the standards. I want to choose the auditors. I want final sign-off on every new supplier partnership. And I do not want anyone, including you, to be able to override my decisions on safety." Terrence leaned against the hallway wall. He closed his eyes. Not because he was tired, because he was relieved. "What would the title be?" he asked. "Director of Supply Chain Safety and Quality Assurance." "Done. I have conditions. Name them." "The department reports directly to the board. Not to you. Not to any vice president. The board. That way nobody can bury a report the way Gerald did." "Done. And I want access to every supplier file, past and present. I want to audit the entire history, not just going forward." "Done. And I start in 2 weeks. I need to give Ray my notice. He gave me a job when nobody else would. I will not leave him short." Terrence smiled. He could not help it. 2 weeks. "I will have your office ready." There was a pause on the line. Then Nadine said something soft, almost to herself. "Darnell always said I should be running things instead of fixing them." "He was right," Terrence said. Nadine started on a Monday. Her office was on the 7th floor, not a corner office, not a big one. She did not want big. She wanted functional. A desk, a computer, a whiteboard, and a framed photo of Darnell that she placed on the shelf behind her chair. She built the department from nothing. She wrote the protocols herself, nights and weekends. She interviewed and hired 4 auditors in the first month. She set inspection standards that were 20% stricter than OSHA minimum requirements. Some of the old-timers grumbled. Some of the sales team complained that her standards were slowing down vendor onboarding. Nadine did not care. She had seen what happens when standards are low. She wore the proof on her hands every single day. Within 3 months, her department had flagged and removed 11 supplier product lines that failed to meet the new thresholds. 2 of those suppliers had defect histories that nobody had ever bothered to review. Nadine reviewed them. Nadine caught them. Nadine stopped them. The staff went from skeptical to respectful to something closer to awe. Not because Nadine was loud or demanding, but because she was right. Every single time. And she treated everyone with the same calm, direct fairness that she had learned in a one-bay garage on the east side of Detroit. 6 months after Nadine came back, Terrence realized something had changed between them. Not suddenly, not dramatically. More like the way a season changes. You do not notice the exact day it happens. You just wake up one morning and the air feels different. They had dinner together sometimes, not at restaurants, not anywhere fancy, at her apartment. She had moved to a slightly bigger place in East Point, 2 bedrooms. Isaiah finally had his own room. The walls were covered in drawings of cars and rockets and solar systems. Nadine cooked. She was not a great cook. She would be the first to admit it. But she made a pot roast on Sundays that Darnell's mother had taught her, and it was honest food made with steady hands, and Terrence loved every bite. Isaiah would sit at the table and talk about school. He had gotten an A on his science test. He wanted to know how rocket engines worked. He wanted to know why some metals rust and others do not. Terrence answered what he could and admitted when he did not know. Isaiah respected that. One Sunday evening, the 3 of them were at the kitchen table, dishes cleared. Isaiah was drawing in his notebook. The apartment was quiet, except for the scratch of his pencil and the hum of the refrigerator. Nadine looked at Terrence. He looked at her, and in that small, ordinary moment, something settled between them. Not fireworks, not grand declarations, just a quiet certainty, like 2 pieces of a machine clicking into place. The way things fit when they are built right. "Darnell would have liked you," Nadine said softly. Terrence looked at her. He understood the weight of those words. She was not comparing them. She was not replacing anyone. She was opening a door that she had kept locked for 3 years, and she was trusting him to walk through it carefully. "I wish I could have known him," Terrence said, and he meant it. Nadine reached across the table. She placed her hand on his. Her scarred hand. The hand that had gripped a wrench at age 12. The hand that had earned calluses in a factory. The hand that had worn a gold wedding ring smudged with grease. The hand that had reached into a fire to save the man she loved. The hand that had fixed a car in the rain on a Friday night. The hand that had built a safety department from nothing. That hand, with all its damage and all its strength, rested on his. Terrence wrapped his fingers around hers. Gently, like he was holding something precious. "These hands saved me," he said quietly. "Not my car, not my company. Me." Nadine smiled. Not a big smile, a real one. The kind that starts in the eyes and does not need anything else. Isaiah looked up from his drawing. He saw them holding hands across the table. He studied the scene for a moment. Then he went back to his notebook, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And maybe it was. 1 year later, Nadine Coleman sat for the ASE Master Technician Certification exam. She took it at a testing center in downtown Atlanta on a Saturday morning. Isaiah waited in the lobby with a coloring book and a juice box. She finished in 2 hours and 14 minutes. When the results came back 3 weeks later, she had scored the highest in her testing group. She framed the certificate and hung it in her office next to the photo of Darnell. But the certificate was not the thing she was most proud of that year. With Terrence's support and her own savings, Nadine established the Darnell Coleman Memorial Scholarship Fund. The program provided full tuition for vocational automotive training to children of workers who had been injured or killed in workplace accidents. The first class had 9 students. By the end of the year, it had 26. Brooks Automotive became the first company in the auto parts distribution industry to implement a 3-tier supply chain safety verification system. Every new supplier had to pass an independent quality audit, a materials traceability review, and a safety compliance certification before a single part entered the warehouse. The system Nadine designed was featured in a business journal as a model for corporate accountability in the automotive sector. Other companies started calling, asking how it worked, asking if they could adopt it. Nadine took those calls herself, every single one. But the moment that mattered most did not happen in a boardroom or a testing center. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon in a small vocational training facility on the south side of Atlanta. The building used to be a tire shop. Nadine had it converted with funding from the scholarship program. New workbenches, diagnostic equipment, tool stations, a classroom with a whiteboard and 15 chairs. Nadine was standing at the front of the room, teaching a class on basic engine diagnostics. She wore work clothes, no suit, no heels. Just the same kind of outfit she had always worn when she worked. Her sleeves were rolled up. Her scarred hands held a distributor cap as she explained how ignition timing worked. Then, the door opened. A young woman walked in. She was 19 years old, thin, nervous. She wore a fast food uniform with a name tag that said, Keisha. She had a toddler on her hip and a look on her face that Nadine recognized immediately. It was the look of someone who has been told no so many times that she has stopped expecting yes. "Excuse me," the young woman said quietly. "I heard you teach people how to fix cars. I do not have any money. But I want to learn. I want to do something better for my daughter." The room went quiet. The other students looked at Nadine. Nadine set down the distributor cap. She walked over to the young woman slowly. She looked at her hands. Keisha's hands were red and rough from washing dishes in hot water all day. They were the hands of someone who worked hard, someone who never stopped. Nadine smiled. A real smile, the kind that starts deep and works its way up. "Come here," Nadine said gently. "Let me see your hands." Keisha held out her hands. Nadine took them in hers. Scarred skin against raw skin. Two different kinds of damage. The same kind of strength. "These are good hands," Nadine said. "These are hands that can learn." In the back corner of the room, Isaiah sat at a small desk doing his homework. He was 8 now, taller, still quiet, still curious. He looked up from his math worksheet and watched his mother hold the young woman's hands. He did not say anything. He just watched. And then he smiled, a small, proud smile, and went back to his work. Because Isaiah had seen his mother do a lot of things in his short life. He had seen her fix cars in the rain. He had seen her cry at the kitchen table after everyone was supposed to be asleep. He had seen her soak her hands in warm water every single night without complaining. He had seen her walk away from something good because it was the right thing to do, and he had seen her walk back in on her own terms. But this was the thing that made him the proudest. Watching his mama take someone else's hands and say, "You can do this," the same way someone had once done for her. And that is how the story of Nadine Coleman comes to a close. Not with a wedding, not with a mansion, not with a fairy tale ending wrapped in a bow. It ends with a woman standing in a converted tire shop, holding the hands of a stranger and passing on the one thing that nobody could ever take from her: her skill, her strength, her refusal to break. So what does this story teach us? It teaches us to never look at someone's circumstances and assume we know their story. The woman fixing her car in the rain might be the most skilled person in the room. The man in the suit might be the one who needs saving. You cannot see someone's value from the outside. You have to look closer. You have to look at their hands. It teaches us that success is not just about profit. It is about what you are willing to change when you discover you are part of the problem. Terrence Brooks could have buried those quality reports. He could have kept the prestige contract and protected his bottom line. But he chose to listen to a woman who had already paid the price that his industry was pretending did not exist. And that choice, that hard and expensive choice, made him a better man than any Forbes list ever could. And it teaches us this. Nadine did not wait to be rescued. She did not sit on the side of the road hoping someone would stop. She got under the car. She picked up the wrench. She fixed it herself. One turn at a time. One day at a time. One scar at a time. She rescued herself, and then she turned around and started rescuing others. So let me ask you something. Have you ever looked at someone and judged them by what they were wearing, by the car they drove, by the neighborhood they lived in, and then discovered that they were extraordinary? Have you ever had to rebuild your life from the ashes? You ever held everything together with nothing but your own 2 hands? Tell me your story in the comments. I want to hear it. And if you know someone who is fighting alone right now, A single parent working 2 jobs. A worker who has been wronged by a system that was supposed to protect them. Someone who refuses to give up even when the world keeps saying they should. Share this story with them. Sometimes, knowing that someone else understands is the only thing that keeps a person going. If this story moved you, please subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell. There is another powerful story coming soon, and I do not want you to miss it. May your hands always find the work they were made for, and may someone somewhere see the skill in your scars. Now, before I go, I want to step out from behind the story for a moment and talk to you directly, not as a narrator, just as me. This story is a work of fiction. Nadine and Terrence are not real people. Brooks Automotive is not a real company. Prestige Electrical Systems does not exist. The events in this video did not happen. But the themes are very real. Every year in the United States, over 5,000 workers die from on-the-job injuries. Thousands more are seriously hurt. And too many of those accidents are preventable. They happen because equipment is not maintained, because safety reports get filed and forgotten, because somebody somewhere decides that fixing the problem costs more than ignoring it until it does not. And the families left behind often face the same thing Nadine faced in this story. Low settlements, lost jobs, no support. They are expected to move on quietly. Most of them do, not because they want to, because they have no choice. If you or someone you know has been affected by a workplace injury, I encourage you to learn about your rights. Every state has different labor laws and workers' compensation rules. Organizations like OSHA and the National Council for Occupational Safety and Health can point you in the right direction. Knowledge is power, and knowing your rights is the first step toward making sure what happened in this story does not happen to someone you love. I wrote this story because I grew up watching my own mother fix things around the house with her bare hands. Not because she wanted to, because there was no one else to do it. The faucet that leaked, the door that would not close, the car that made a noise every winter. She figured it out. She always figured it out. I never told her how much that meant to me. How watching her hands work taught me more about strength than any book or movie ever could. So this story is for her, and for every parent who holds it together with nothing but willpower and worn-out hands. Thank you for spending this time with me. I know it was a long one, but stories like this remind me why I do what I do. See you in the next one. Stay kind, stay strong, and never be afraid to get your hands dirty.